This is the Spirit and Wellness Show. News and information from a higher perspective. With your host, Harry Wilkinson. Yes, welcome to the Spirit and Wellness Show. I am your host, Harry Wilkinson, and this is the show where we take a look at the days and weeks events, happenings in the world, happenings in politics, domestically, internationally. We take a look at science, breakthroughs, technology, all of these things that we hear about or interact with during our week through varying forms of media. And there are so many these days, right? The new media, which, works on your cell phone or your social media interactions. And the more traditional media like the 24-hour news stations, or even just your radio in the car when you're driving to work or going about your day doing errands. These things come at you. Information. Some of it useful, some of it, not so. Not so much. And some of it is downright disturbing. And we take a look at these things from a higher perspective. Because if we don't, then much of the information that comes at us can really have negative effects. And we're talking about, we've been talking about the past couple of weeks, we've been talking about the health effects of our attitude and our mind and all of these things. And this is one of the things that affects, your state of mind. As you go through your day and these things come at you, as I say, maybe from the radio, maybe you look at your cell phone, or maybe you turn on the TV, and you hear things that are disturbing to you. Things that Congress is doing, or the president is doing, or has said. More recently, the hurricanes that we've had and the people who've been suffering. Information about climate change. There's a situation abroad in Myanmar now, which is disturbing on first glance. We have a situation where the Buddhist monks in Myanmar are trying to force out Muslims from Rohingya. And it's become close to a tragedy. The UN is concerned about that. And the UN is quite concerned that this is going to amount to ethnic cleansing. And more disturbing, I think, for a lot of people is the response, or the non-response from Aung San Suu Kyi. If you aren't familiar with her, although you probably heard a lot about her this week on the news, Aung San Suu Kyi was a Nobel Peace Prize, is a Nobel Peace Prize laureate. And she had been under house arrest by the military that ran Burma, now called Myanmar, for many, many years, because she was sort of a symbol of freedom and a more democratic government. Well, as she was released and the government in Myanmar began to change, or so we thought, to become more democratic, she became a figure of much upon as a leader in bringing peace, which is why she won the Nobel Peace Prize. And now people are, well, there's quite a bit of concern over this Rohingya business, because she has not condemned what has been going on, the burning of villages and attacking civilians by the Buddhist majority in that part of the country. And in fact, she has denied that much of this stuff is going on, or that it's as bad as it's being stated. She continues to say that it's a lot of misinformation and fake news. And the fact is, it's not. Let me just say that. But there's varying reasons why she doesn't come down on this very hard. Part of it has to be because there's a lot of actually support for the actions that are being taken to move the Muslims out, and certainly the military is still very much in charge of what goes on in that country. It's a mistake to think that she, even though she was elected as in an official capacity, she has little, if any, power at all to do anything other than to make statements. So I can understand that with the military not behind that, she could be very much out on a limb, and it could be quite dangerous for her. You have to understand, she could, literally be killed for taking a stance against what's going on. Or at the very least, she could be put back into prison again. So it's somewhat understandable that she might be hesitant to come out against this. But she's being urged to, and she has an address on Tuesday to the nation. So we'll see what happens with that. Okay, but I digress. But that's just an example of the kind of story that might be upsetting to you. So we take a look at these stories from a higher perspective, and that's the perspective of our oneness. Just to be as simple as possible, that we are all connected at the highest level of our being, and that there is a higher level to our being, that we are not just our bodies, and that in fact we are creating everything that we interact with in the world, in the mundane world, at that level. And we create it for a reason. And that reason is so that we can have these experiences, that we can experience that which we truly are not, and begin to understand that we are more than that, and reconnect with the truth of who and what we are. Just briefly to explain, if you've not heard me talk about this before, if you're new to the show, the idea is that we are here in a certain form, our physical bodies, and when we do that, when we step into the game of human existence, if you will, or I've often likened it to a virtual reality scenario in which everything looks real. There are things that are that you're interacting with, but it's not really the truth of it, but it feels very much like it, and you interact as if these things are happening. So I often liken it to that concept. This is sort of a virtual reality world that we've created, kind of like a little lab in a way, in which to experiment in a way, to experience things that are not the truth of who we are. And that includes things like, the pain and the suffering of hardship and death. That's not the truth of who and what we are. But we experience that so that we can remember who we are. And once we connect to that, rise above it. And you begin to learn when you embark on an understanding like that, even trying to understand, and you involve meditation, going into these situations, and rather than judging them or getting upset about them or having them trigger, sad or happy reactions, when you accept what's going on as something that has been created by your higher self, if you will, to help you grow, to help you get strong, to help you become. When you accept that, there's immediately a change in you, a change in your attitude, and that results in a change in of what's going on around you. So it's very powerful, and it's also very, challenging to begin to get that understanding. It's almost, I feel like you have to have some sort of, almost some sort of event happen in your life that triggers that response and makes you begin to think about things in a different way. But listen, I think that most people who are listening to this program, or still listening and haven't turned to another program, already have that understanding, or at least an inkling of it. So that is the approach that we use here. So when talking about things like, the hurricanes, I mentioned this last week, when you have these huge events that sort of galvanize people and get people's attention, there's a reason for that. This is something that we've created to bring ourselves together in a way. Because what we know, at the very highest level of our beings, the very ultimate truth, there's no such thing as death or pain even, or fear. But we allow ourselves to experience those things in a way to negate them. Okay, so I don't want to spend the whole show on, talking about this, because we talk about it every week, so I want to move on. But that's the basis of what we're doing here. So we understand when we interact with these kinds of stories, while we should respond, and we should have a sense of tragedy, we also understand that there's more behind it. So anyway, we're talking about states of mind and how they affect your health. And we've been looking at the works of particularly two doctors. Of course, our favorite Dr. Weil, Andrew Weil, we refer to quite frequently. We'll be talking about his take on some of this. But also Dr. Rankin, Lisa Rankin. She has a book called Mind Over Medicine.